free agency frenzy has come and gone. So now the Vikings have brand new players and old players on brand new teams. So let's talk about which players have come to Minnesota and which ones have left via free agency.
12 seconds to go in the game. Niners lead by 4. He'll fire to the right side.
So starting off, we'll start with the good. The players on other teams that have come and signed with Minnesota. Starting off with the guard slash tackle from Chicago, Tom Compton, straight out of Compton. Tom Compton, I expect to take a Jeremiah Searles type role and I would expect him to make the team because the Vikings really need as much offensive line depth as possible. It'll be interesting to see how good he is in camp. He doesn't have a lot of information on him. It doesn't hurt that he's an offensive lineman, so it's hard to tell based off stats and tape how good is he, especially if he's a backup role. The Vikings signed him. I expect him to at least be a very late cut in camp, but since the Vikings need as much depth as possible, I would expect him to make the team and take the Jeremiah Searles type backup role where he could back up both tackle and guard. I don't know if he has any experience playing center, but I'm assuming if he needed to be, he could be an emergency backup center as well. Next, the Vikings have a few camp body signings. Nick Dooley is a long snapper. I don't think the Vikings will make him sit on the team, but hey, he's here now. Josiah Price, a tight end. Again, the Vikings are good at tight end unless he shines in training camp. Expect him to be gone. So now, to the two biggest signings. Starting on the defensive side of the ball, Sheldon Richardson. Now, the Vikings had Tom Johnson starting the 3 technique spot next to Linval Joseph, and he looked okay. But as far as this Vikings starters, was easily the weakest link on the team. So now, being the weakest link on the best defense may not be the worst thing to say about you, but all of a sudden we go from having a bad 3 technique to one of the better ones. Now, is Sheldon Richardson the best 3 technique? Well, no, that guy lives in LA. But he's very, very solid, above average to good, and turns Tom Johnson, an aging 30-plus-year-old defensive tackle, and has him come to Minnesota. So now his stats have been low as of late, but he's been playing out of position a little bit in Seattle, and I would expect him to do a whole lot more. And he's been a lot more disruptive than his stats have shown. He's been very good in the run game and getting pressures that don't necessarily translate to sacks, but I do expect, since the Vikings have very good defensive ends with Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter on the outside, the quarterback will step into the big arms of Sheldon Richardson. I would expect 3 or 4 sacks on the year, maybe even more. I think he'll fit in very good in Minnesota and can really elevate this defense to the next level. The biggest signing, could it be anybody else? Kirk Cousins, hopefully the savior, coming to Minnesota. Now, of course, Kirk Cousins is followed by either extreme praise or extreme warning. Oh my goodness, the Vikings overpaid for him. Oh no, the Vikings fell into the trap that the Ravens did. Now they won't be able to sign anybody else. This is awful. How could they do this? Or, yes, we got the next Drew Brees. How dare the Redskins let him hit free agency? Now the Vikings are going all the way for the next 3 years that he signed. 3 years, $84 million, fully guaranteed. But don't get your horses all caught up in a bunch. Kirk Cousins, I think, will be a top 10 quarterback next year and will take this team to the next level. I have plans of how much he would have made a difference in the NFC championship game, because I think it's a lot more than what meets the eye. Yes, the defense is a big reason we lost that game, but a lot of it is due to the offense getting the Eagles all that momentum that they needed to really take care of the Vikings. So I think Kirk Cousins, even in a type of blowout games, is the type of guy that can keep the Vikings in it, and is an upgrade on Case Keenum. Yes, Case Keenum's stats were good last year, but don't act like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen weren't on the team as well and weren't already having good years, especially week 1. You saw how good they were with Sam Bradford, and Case Keenum was a definite step down from Bradford. So let's let Kirk Cousins fly in Minnesota, and I would expect in the neighborhood of 30 touchdowns and 4,300 yards. And the Kirk Cousins should light it up in Minnesota, a Pro Bowler almost for sure. The beauty of taking a couple of days to edit the video is when more breaking news pops up, I can add it into this one. So, just today on March 30th, the Vikings have signed free agent wide receiver from the Bears, Kendall Wright. Kendall Wright is the most blatant Jarius Wright replacement that's just so blatant. Not only because they have the same name, so hopefully my boy Kendall changes his number to 17 so Vikings fans that have Jarius Wright jerseys can, keep them. But they're very similar players, both small slot type receivers, except for some reason Kendall Wright is just better. He's just better across the board. He's cheaper and he has got more production throughout his career. Kendall Wright has a little bit been up and down throughout his career. His rookie year in 2012, he had 64 receptions for 626 yards. I wish the Vikings young receiver do something like that. His best year in 2013, he had 94 receptions for 1,079 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he had 6 more touchdowns in 2014 in only 14 games where he had 715 yards. And most recently in 2017, he had 59 receptions for 614 yards. Comparing that to Jarius Wright, who's the best year, his best year. In 2014, 42 receptions, 588 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kendall Wright catching balls from rookie Mitchell Trubisky on the awful Bears offense had a better season than Jarius Wright's best. So I think this is a clear upgrade, and Vikings fans should be happy. I don't think this will be a lot like Floyd last year, who just didn't produce whatsoever. And I do think that he'll just fill in the same role as Jarius Wright. But will this hurt Laquan Treadwell? I don't think not really, because they aren't very similar receivers at all. Kendall Wright's 5'10", Laquan Treadwell's 6'2". That means he will most likely produce in the slot. And he's mostly just a backup option for breathers and if there's injuries for Stephon Diggs, and mainly Adam Thielen, as Adam Thielen is the Vikings' main slot receiver. So moving on. Now, his backup, acquired in a trade from Denver, Trevor Siemian. Now, Trevor Siemian, right when it happened, a lot of Vikings, including myself, a lot of Vikings fans, including myself, were saying, why? He was so bad in Denver and couldn't even win the starting job. Why would we want him? Well, because he doesn't have to be our starter. He's going to be our backup, of course. And very interesting enough, this sounds a lot like when we signed Case Keenum last year. If you recall, Case Keenum wasn't some, oh my goodness, amazing MVP candidate like he was this year. He was just some random quarterback we got off the street, and now very similar to Trevor Siemian. If you looked at their stats before coming to Minnesota, almost identical. And coming to Minnesota, the Vikings had to give the Broncos a 2019 5th round pick, and we got Siemian and a 2018 7th round pick. Very good value, a $2 million backup with a starting experience. Gotta be one of the better backups in the league, probably top 5 or so. So a very good trade that very under the radar. And since the Vikings have started their backup all year, the last 2 years, you can expect Trevor Siemian to be starting by week 3 unless the Vikings bubble wrap Kirk Cousins with everything that they can absolutely acquire. Just kidding. Kirk Cousins has the very good injury history, so don't expect him to get hurt. But Trevor Siemian's a very good number 2 option if something does happen to Kirk. Now, re-signing Vikings. Marcus Shell's re-signed, and when I'm recording this video, now, when I made my video, I don't think Marcus Sherrills is that good anymore. You see a lot of the explosiveness that he showed earlier in his career start to fade. He doesn't really get tackles. He doesn't play on defense at all anymore. He's just not good enough to make the cut. And he's returning. Like, you don't see any touchdowns from him. He's sure hands, sure. But I would have been just fine if the Vikings just went their other way with Marcus Sherrills. This really goes to show how all the other Vikings that had chances to return kicks last year in preseason and during practice must have just really underperformed. Rodney Adams, a 4th-round pick last year, already is gone and went to the Colts. That's not even on this list, and he was supposed to take over the Cordell Patterson role, and he just did nothing with it. And the Vikings had the other wide receiver that they got late in the round, and he did a little bit better in training camp, so I would have expected him to maybe have a chance for the role, but it seems like Marcus Sherrills will again be the Vikings' main returner come 2018. The Vikings on the other side of special teams also re-signed their kicker last year, Kai Forbath, to another 1-year prove-it deal. I would expect that they would bring in competition for Kai. Dylan Bradley, a defensive tackle, brought in very cheap, $480,000. Could very well just be a cam body. A very big low-key signing, Nick Easton, guard/center, 1 year for $2.9 million. Anthony Harris, 1 year, $705,000. Very similar players. Anthony Harris filling in for safety spots. You can make the case, say, just as good, if not better, than Andrew Sendejo. I think Sendejo still edges him out, but at $705,000, Anthony Harris can make a very strong case. Dude, we could just get rid of Sendejo and save a lot of money there and let Anthony Harris start, because you definitely don't have a big drop off there. Nick Easton will probably be the Vikings starting guard, especially with another one that retired recently. A bigger surprise, Mac Brown got a new contract, 1 year, $630,000. Mac Brown was a random guy we signed late in the year. He kind of was a Dalvin Cook replacement, but it was way late for that to even be an option. So very interesting. The Vikings must have saw something out of him in practice to even give him a chance to come back to camp. $630,000 next year. Mostly a camp body, I would imagine, but maybe he makes the team. Who knows? Josh Andrews starts off this list of reserve contracts. Nobody really notable here except for Caleb Jones. There'll be about 8 of them. I'll go through them quickly. Josh Andrews, Storm Norton, Jack Toko. He was a DB last year that we got in the draft. He's another somewhat notable one. Cedric Lang, Antoine Williams, D-Top Williams, Horace Richardson, Ifeadi Adebo, defensive end rookie we got last year, and Brandon Zigastra. So now, grab the tissues. These are the players that left, and it is a fairly big list. So let's go and look at this. Starting off, Shamar Stephen, defensive tackle, went to the Seahawks. Of course, the Seahawks are the Vikings of the West. Of course, they also got Tom Johnson. So the Vikings got the Seahawks all defensive tackles, so they took both of the Vikings last year. Jeremiah Searles went to the Panthers, a very solid backup. Emmanuel Lamur signed with the Raiders. It was interesting that he got so much of a look since he was just a backup of the Vikings for many years. Jarius Wright, a 2-year deal to the Panthers. He got cut, and he's going to Carolina. I know a lot of Vikings fans don't like that because a lot of them aren't big fans of Laquan Treadwell, but I think Laquan's got a lot more in him than his stats show. So a 2-year, $3.5 million to Carolina. I hope he does well. I like Jarius. I didn't think he was super necessary. I would have liked if the Vikings could have traded him, but there you have it. He gets a new home in Carolina. Tremaine Brock somehow got $4 million out of the Denver Broncos. Tremaine Brock was a backup corner for the Vikings that didn't do a whole lot at all. Jerick McKinnon, another sad one, signed a 4-year, $30 million to the 49ers. I think that's a lot of money for the guy that's been a backup running back for the Vikings. I think McKinnon was a better option backing up Dalvin Cook this year than Latavius Murray, not only because he would have been cheaper, but a receiving back that can block is better than a guy that needs a lot of carries to really get going for a backup. So I would have rather that if we could have found a way to get rid of Latavius Murray. Nothing against the guy, I just think that McKinnon's a better back. Now, the quarterback carousel, all leaving. Teddy Bridgewater, to the Jets. 1 year, $6 million. Now, I think Teddy's going to get a really raw deal. The Jets also re-signed their veteran quarterback and already traded up in the draft. Almost certainly will be drafting a quarterback, so Teddy might get the chance to be the bridge option and get to be the quarterback this year, but I really doubt he stays any longer than this year in New York. Sam Bradford somehow told the Cardinals that he'll be healthy. I don't know how he convinced them, but 1 year, $20 million with an option for 2019, I believe also worth $20 million. This has bridge quarterback written all over it, so I do think the Cardinals will probably draft the quarterback again this year. Case Keenum went to Denver. I know he was the miracle passer, got the Vikings to the best position in years, but hey, I hope he does good in Denver, but I really don't think he's as good, and you'll probably see him get exposed behind that really awful Denver offensive line. And Kyle Carter, the Vikings' third-string tight end, went to the Giants for 1 year. So he was a decent little option there. We had him on the practice squad for years, and he finally came up and showed some flashes. And hope he does pretty well there. He'll be a backup tight end there, and hope he does pretty good. Retired Joe Berger, a pretty big loss for the Vikings. He's retired. He's of course old. He had a very good career. Was a backup center/guard for the majority of his career in Minnesota, and then came in and was a stud, just very consistently being the Vikings' number 1 or number 2 best offensive lineman, which is huge when the Vikings line was so bad for a good chunk of that time. Remaining free agents, pretty short list. Terrence Newman, I expect him to get re-signed. Michael Floyd, he'll probably leave. Sharif Floyd is all but retired due to his nerve injury. But Bishop Sankey, a decent chance he comes back for at least a camp body. And Sean Washington, maybe for a camp body, but he'll probably be gone as well. He's a linebacker. So I think free agency is about done in Minnesota. Maybe a few more here and there, but I don't think any more big signs will happen. But stay tuned to the channel. The draft is just around the corner. Many more videos coming up. So if you are new, click that subscribe button and like this video for more Vikings news videos in the future. But until then, stay tuned. Skull. We'll see you guys next time.